All right, guys. So the other day, I was live talking about my experience at the Boston Charlie Kirk Vigil, but that video unfortunately got taken down. I must have shared something that I shouldn't have. So I've been to two other vigils, three in total, and I figured I would get on here and just talk this through a little bit. But I do want to talk about, again, what happened in Boston. A lot of people were curious of what went down. Now, I have no clue how long this video will be, but here's the story of my experiences for these vigils that I went to. So prior to the event in Boston, we'll start with Boston. I promised both of my kids I would take them to a playground that they really like going to. And I didn't realize the amount of traffic there would be to get back home from said playground. So I ordered an Uber. And as soon as I dropped them off, I ended up getting into the Uber and I showed up to the event maybe 7:30. Could have been a little bit later than that. And that's my fault. That's on me. But I was a little bit late. But I figured that's fine. I'll just slide in here and stand in the back and pay my respects. But unfortunately, it didn't quite happen like that because when I walked up to the State House, next to me on both sides of the State House, there were these barricades and the cops were there. So the cops stopped me and they said I was on the wrong side. I was trying to get in through the exit side. And they also said to me, which I find really strange, and I want to talk about this for a few minutes. They said that our boss said, or the chief said, we're not letting anybody else in. And that really floored me because right there, people were still trying to get into this event and they weren't allowing them to go through. They were turning them away. And I also don't think this is for safety issues. And I'll explain why of why I don't think it was a safety issue in a few minutes. So it wasn't because the event was necessarily full. There was a ton of room. This was at the Common, okay? And here's what happened next. So a couple of the officers, they actually recognized me. And even that wasn't enough to get me through. I wasn't looking for some, special treatment here. But yeah, given what was happening, it would have been a little bit nice. But yeah, it didn't happen either way. So here's the deal. They asked me if I was a speaker at the event. And even though I wasn't quite sure if I had to speak or not, I said yes. Okay, I figured that would give me a little bit of edge. So they proceeded to tell me to go to the other side of the State House where the other barricades were and where other cops were. So I decided to do that, okay? So I basically had to walk around the entire backside of the State House, come back around and get to what they deemed to be the entry side. And while I did that, of course, I was trying to keep as low profile as possible because there was a whole bunch of lunatics out there. There was a lot of them. So I get to the other side and I'm met by even more police officers, even more cops and more barricades. But I got the same story. This is the entrance, but we are not letting anybody else in. So I decided to tell them, as they said on the other side, that I was a speaker. And they still wouldn't let me in. So at this point, I'm thinking to myself, what the hell is going on here? Why were cops not, or it's not even the cops' fault at this point, in my opinion. I'm really curious if it was the chief of police directly or if he was informed to give that order to not let anybody else in. Because obviously there was still a ton of room because this was the Common. It was Boston Common. So anyway, a group of people ended up coming out and they spotted me and it was good. It wasn't bad. I'm always concerned of that. And they were subscribers of the channel. And it's funny because I told them that the police, they wouldn't let me in. And they started, talking to the cops, yelling at the cops to let this guy through, meaning me, but it was still no dice, okay? There was still no dice here. Now, the strange thing about this, again, is I'm very, very interested in why the cops were told to not let anybody in, including speakers. I would also like to find out perhaps if someone from I personally don't think that the order came directly from the chief of police. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But I think that there's a slight probability that it could have came from the Wu administration, from them to the cops, and this is what happened. And I'm probably going to do some digging on that and see what the hell is going on, because I feel like there's a little bit of a story there. Anyway, now, the weird thing about this was, and this is why, the weird thing about this was, if this was a safety issue, I later found out, and I don't know if it was a cop or, a civilian, let's say, but they said you could walk around the backside of the common, opposite of the State House, and you could just walk up through. Now, the reason that I don't think that the police were ordered to stop people from going in per a safety issue is because the area that I had to enter the common from, this is where all of the lunatic protesters were, including Antifa. These people were masked. They were like hyenas, okay? They were masked up. They were hooded. They, couldn't see faces, which I find quite ironic because they are the ones that are calling for ICE to not wear masks, yet they do it, right? It is what it is. And again, they were like yelling like hyenas. They had, I think they had megaphones and drums and all this stuff. So now, I'm thinking it's decision time. Do I turn back and go home, or do I risk walking through the gauntlet, right? That's what this was. This was a gauntlet. And I'll be real with you. I was a little hesitant at this point because I was by myself. I didn't have anybody with me. I didn't want to drag anybody out with me. And I wanted to do this on my own. So, because I wanted to really absorb what was happening. So anyway, I figured I got to be at this vigil. So I threw my hood up. I kept my head down, and maybe I even took my glasses off at that point. And I walked straight through that mess. And that's putting it lightly. And it was ugly. Okay. Screaming, yelling, I think they were like, tearing the American flag in half. I don't know why these people stay here if they don't like it here, but it is what it is. But somehow, some way, I made it up to the backside of where the vigil was. Now, when I got there, it was like stepping into another world. It was really like stepping into another world. There was a massive crowd. I couldn't even describe how many people were there. I know that there were some news outlets saying that there was hundreds, but I realistically think there was a couple thousand people there. Maybe not upwards of 5,000, but I would say more than 1,000 and less than 2,500, maybe somewhere in the middle. So here's what happened next. I slid off to the left, okay? I slid off to the left, and I made myself, I got as close to the wall as possible, which was facing the State House. I was facing the State House. The wall where the speakers were they were basically on the back side of that wall. This is when an angel came out of nowhere, and I'll explain why. This was Joan Quinn Eastman, who I believe is a journalist and a contributor to Boston Broadside. She had her badge on, she had her press badge, and I don't consider myself press. I'm a guy that sits here and does this, but she spotted me, and she ended up dragging me around the stairs to the opposite side, and now I'm right in the thick of it, okay? I'm right by the speakers, and I owe Joan a big thank you for that, and for what I'll tell you in a few minutes. So, this wasn't just another gathering. This was not a rally or anything of that nature. This was something very, very powerful, okay? This was something very powerful. As a matter of fact, all of the vigils that I went to and I spoke to were very powerful. Brian Foley, who I believe is the person that put this event on, he could give an absolute masterclass on this because the organization, the respect, and I think the sheer turnout was absolutely incredible. The second I got up there, though, completely unprepared, they asked me to speak. Totally unprepared, totally unplanned, and totally on the spot. Now, I know other speakers were going to talk, and I was mindful of that, okay? There's a couple clips of me talking floating around somewhere. And I posted the one clip. It's not the entirety of it. I don't have the entire thing. But if somebody does, that's great. But anyway, I wanted to be mindful of the other speakers that were, let's say, organized to speak there. But man, I went up there, looking at the sea of people, the news, and it's really something that I will never forget. And I'll be honest with you, this won't be the last time you see me at organized events like this. It will not be, because something really... there was something special that happened, okay? And I didn't speak for that long, again, because I wanted to be mindful of the other speakers. But here's the thing. I would say it wasn't all peace, okay? It was not all peace because, at least not by a long shot, because across from the Common, these people that were protesting a vigil, for God's sakes, you know, they were yelling, they were disrupting, and then some real danger occurred. There was one guy, he had a mask on, a hood up, he came up running through the crowd, and he was looking for somebody by the name of Rob. They said, we have a situation. I don't know what the situation was, but I know a couple people were arrested, and one, I believe, was arrested with a knife, okay? So it started to get a little bit crazy. So think of that. You know, we weren't protesting. We weren't rallying together. This wasn't like some sort of political rally. We were trying to do our best to remember Charlie Kirk, okay? And these people were evil. They wanted pure chaos. I think these people live in a world of chaos. They thrive in a world of chaos. And I feel like it's very clear because I saw it with my own eyes. Now, as the night went on, things only escalated. Within about 15 to 20 minutes left for the vigil. Actually, no, I'm wrong. It wasn't 15 or 20 minutes. We left 15 or 20 minutes before we lost police detail. And I don't know if things were escalating or people were trying to break through, but it was bad. It was bad enough to end the event early. Remember, the event was from 7 to 10, but we only had police detail till 9:15. So Brian, I believe, was the one that said, look, we got to call this. Things are getting a little bit crazy. And there were speakers that never even got their chance to even speak. There was multiple other speakers. Now, I will tell you, at this given point in time, I'm genuinely worried because the police detail was only until 9:15, not until 10. So that gave us about maybe 15 to, excuse me, maybe 15 to 20 minutes of getting out of there protected. Now, here's the reason why Joan, why she was an angel for me that night. Because she found a media company called CR News Team and FLM. And there was a nice lady there, older lady named Janet Aldrich, and her colleague, John Abrahamson. They were basically all of us escorting each other out of there, and their car was on the right side of the State House. So they ended up giving me a ride home because obviously I didn't feel safe there. I didn't feel safe waiting for an Uber, walking around aimlessly. And again, it did get a little bit sketchy there. But here's the thing, guys. Despite all this like nonsense and despite all this chaos and despite all the arrests and despite all the fear being at the vigil, it really changed something. And I think it changed a lot of people. I really do, because it really showed us the power of standing together and standing up for something, and the power of young people willing to put their faith, their family, and their country first. And you know, that's why I made this pledge at, I think, maybe all three rallies. I can't remember for sure, but I don't care how much time or energy it takes, but I'm going to do whatever I can to fight to get more Turning Point chapters open and thriving, not only in Massachusetts, but I would even do this throughout New England as well. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm planning on doing it somehow, some way. I did get a couple connections with some students that are part of the leadership team at Turning Point. If you are part of leadership at Turning Point, or you know somebody that is, maybe send them this video. Because again, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. So please reach out to me. I think it's very, very important. I don't know what I can do. I don't know what I can't do, but I want to do something, whether it be advocating, advertising, whatever it is. Okay. Because I really feel like this movement matters. That night in Boston, this wasn't just a random vigil. This was like a wake-up call, not only for me, but for a lot of people. And, you know, I'm not going to let this moment die. I'm not going to waste this moment, and I'm not going to let other people waste that moment as well. And to put things into perspective, this wasn't just one vigil in Boston. Okay, it was something much bigger than that. I also spoke in Saturday in Wilmington, and then on Sunday, which I barely made it to, again, another, let's say, playground situation in Wakefield. And every single one of these gatherings, I saw the same thing. I saw ordinary people, families, young students, and neighbors who I think feel disenfranchised or feel like they have been too quiet for far too long. And now is the time to stand up, to unite, and to refuse to be silent, okay? I saw people going, there's people that are going back to church, people are rediscovering community, and people are realizing that faith, family, and country, these aren't just words, okay? They're not just words. They are a foundation of this country. And the crazy part of this is, and I found this out, I think on Saturday, or maybe even during the rally in Boston, but there's 3,500 Turning Point chapters across the country right now. That number is about to explode because there's been over 64,000 let's say, registries to open up more Turning Point chapters. And that's really not just growth. That is an absolute monumental movement. And I will say this, I think it's happening throughout Massachusetts, and I hope it's happening all across New England. But it means that we can't stay quiet anymore. I've talked about this multiple times, guys. We can't let fear dictate whether we speak up or sit down. We can't let our friends, family, or colleagues determine that too. I think these vigils ended up proving that courage can be very, very contagious. And I'm still riding on that high because when a person speaks, it's like, you know, I feel like 10 or more people decide to join in. And I believe what I saw, okay? And I believe in massive changes here, not just politically as well. We're not even talking politically. We're talking about culturally and spiritually as well. And I promise you, what I witnessed at those vigils, this is only the beginning. It's only the beginning. And I'll make the same promise, like I said earlier, anywhere. Like if you want to, if you're a student watching this or an administrator or a teacher or something like that, and you're sick of seeing the way things are being handled around, again, not only Massachusetts, but about or in New England as well, I will do whatever it takes, guys. I will do whatever it takes and dedicate as much time as possible. If you need me to speak, if you need me to organize, you need me to make connections, I will do that. Absolutely no problem at all. But we need to keep and maintain this momentum forward. And we need to make this momentum even stronger. And ultimately, I just found it very inspiring to see so many like-minded people come together for a same common cause. It was absolutely astonishing to see this. I don't know if you were there. If you were there, you probably know what I'm talking about. But just that sense of unity, and again, just the sense of like community and tradition and all of these things. You know, I'm in real estate. I meet with a lot of different people. And I may have talked about this before. I may not have. But I feel like, you know, this is unfortunate to say, but growing up, you know, I grew up in a Italian family. You know, we had a multifamily home. My grandparents lived downstairs. My mom, my dad, we lived upstairs at the time. And we were always doing family things together. Unfortunately, you know, that started to dissipate after my grandparents died, which probably happens in quite a lot of families, I would think. They really... The older generation really holds things together and really holds things down. Once they pass away, those values sometimes don't translate the same way that they did back in the day. At least that's my feeling. I know a lot of you may be out there and you try to do these things. Maybe you get together with family or friends on Saturdays and Sundays, but I find it very important to there's something happens when, and I had this conversation with Mike King. I released that episode. He's from Massachusetts Family Institute. I released that already. But something happens when your kids and your friends or your family, you know, come over and you get together and you sit down and you're talking together and you're having a meal. You know, you're breaking bread. And there's a lot of other cultures that still do this and still maintain this. And again, the only reason I know this is because I am in real estate and I do represent everybody, right? I represent everybody. And I know quite often that if I'm out on a Saturday or a Sunday going to open houses or whatever it may be, you know, there's often times where people say, hey, we have to get back in a little while because X, Y, and Z is coming over. We're going to have dinner. And I feel like that's something that is, people are distracted. People are very, very distracted anymore, whether it be their phones or computers or work, whatever it is. People bring work home from them. And I've honestly, since Charlie passed away too, I've honestly been trying to do my best to, it's hard when you have a business, right? And you have agents and you have all these other things. I understand that. But I've been trying to do my best to at least reserve Sunday. I'm not turning off my phone. Unfortunately, I'm not at that. I can't do that right now, but I've been trying to be mindful of the moment that I'm in. So, for instance, on Sunday, we were at Connor's farm. This was yesterday. I'm recording on Monday, and we were there for like most of the day. I was exhausted, to say the least. And then I ended up having to have my daughter go home with a friend of mine, and my son and my wife ended up coming with me to the vigil. Maybe even some of you met my wife and my son. So, I did what I can to get there. But the fact is like, there's a lot, I feel like there's this trend, not only throughout New England, but throughout the country where, a lot of religion and a lot of, and again, you don't have to go to church every single Sunday. I'm not saying not to. I'm just saying, I think we need to be more mindful of what we have. Everybody is like out here. It's like, especially if you have your own, if you're a business owner, right? We know this. It's very hard to have a work-life balance. It's very, very hard. And what happens is, and this has happened to me on multiple occasions, like the more time that you could generate, whether you're hiring somebody else, they're helping you on the back end or whatever it is, you don't end up dedicating more time to your life. What ends up happening is that void of time that becomes created ends up getting filled up with more work. So it's like, a hamster on a wheel almost, where you're paying money or you're dedicating people to different tasks or different projects or whatever it may be, and you are gaining more time, but over a period of time, that time ends up being dedicated to either getting more work or getting more work done. And I'm not trying to give you, this is a pretty long rant and I apologize. But again, I feel like this is a huge component to what Charlie stood for, right? Faith, family, your country, and those traditional values that I grew up with, I really didn't appreciate them at the time. I was a little bit introverted, I would say, when I was younger. And, I didn't really appreciate that. But as you get older and you start to lose people and you start to lose those traditions, all of a sudden they evaporate, right? They evaporate and family doesn't carry it on. And that's basically what happens. And I'm not saying you should force people to come over for dinner. I'm not saying you should force that upon anybody. But what I am saying is if you do have a family, even if it's just you and your girlfriend or, your husband or your wife, whatever it may be, and especially if you have children, I feel like those things get imprinted. I really do. I feel like those things get imprinted. And it's more than just having dinner. It's about those, the cultural values of this country. And I really feel like a lot of other cultures get it right. And in America, we get it wrong. And I hate to say that, but maybe a lot of you have experienced this as well, where, a lot of other cultures kind of try to, they're very unified. Okay. They're very, very unified. And I feel like in America, we're doing everything we possibly can to avoid family members. Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes that could be a good or a bad thing, but I think it's not for us, okay? We had those experiences as children growing up. It's about providing that experience, regardless of if, you don't get along with some people, family, friends, whatever it may be, but it's about providing that experience to the children and letting that kind of imprint on them and letting them absorb that. So like it's like inherently inside of them, whether they know it or not. And it took me a very long time. And Michael King said this best. I've been saying this a lot. Children are the antidote. And the other part of this, what I want to talk about, and this video is so damn long. If you make it through the whole thing, congratulations, because I'm just talking here. But, the other thing that stems from let's say, bringing all these cultures together and bringing all these traditions together is that it really has an impact on people. It really does. And I feel like what Charlie stood for, what the message that he was trying to bring to this country, it's a message that has been lost. And again, I've said this before, I'll say it again, the American dream, it's not, at least it wasn't thriving that much, right? It really wasn't thriving that much. And I hope that we could get back to somewhat simpler times. And I hope that we could get back to that kind of reality, because I would say on a scale of like happiness, I feel like things are much better when we are honoring tradition and we are honoring the cultures that were kind of instilled in us as children growing up. And I could say the same thing for a lot of the younger generation there. It's absolutely astonishing to me that, I didn't grow up very political. I grew up in a household that, of course, voted and did all of that. But, I wasn't very political growing up. But as you get a job, you get out of school, you get a job, you end up having family, things start to change drastically. And I've noticed this for a lot of people. Let's say a lot of people on the far left, a lot of these people are in two separate categories. A lot of them are either very young, college level students, let's say, and then the other portion of them are very old. And the people in the middle, they're almost non-existent. Okay. At least that's the way it looks to me. You're either, younger college or a little bit older. And it's very surprising to me to see the older generation want to, attribute themselves to that kind of movement, because they're the ones that I would have hoped that they were instilling these values in their families, which leads me to believe that perhaps that they weren't. Okay. And this is just complete and utter speculation here. Okay. This is complete and utter speculation. But I don't see how somebody could live their lives, do all the traditional things of America, and then all of a sudden you end up hating America. You hate the country that you live in. That goes for the older generation. As for the younger generation, again, your job, your career, your family, if you have kids, these things are the antidote to a lot of what is happening on what I perceive to be the radical left. I think a lot of these people, perhaps, maybe they don't have family, maybe they do. And, a lot of what I see happening, there's a lot of gaslighting and brainwashing going around, right? Especially in regards to Charlie, like the legacy, even our media here, they're kind of twisting his words, and they're taking things completely out of context. And when you cherry pick information like that, it's very easy to manipulate that level of information or manipulate that level of data, okay? Because you are cherry picking. But I feel like I think that there's come a time, or it's come now, where we need to do whatever we can to bring back those values, whether it be faith, family, culture, religion, whatever it may be, tradition. And that's it, really. I mean, I was in Catholic school for 10 years. I was in kindergarten to 8th grade. I graduated probably with maybe 8 or 11 kids. It was small classes. We had, it was an Italian, the school was directly connected to the church. So I was in church all the damn time. And then I went to high school. I went to a Catholic high school. The high school wasn't directly connected to a church, but I went for 1 year. And I will say this much. So I did kind of get away from religion for a period of time. And then once I got sick, a lot of you may know this, a lot of you may not, since you might be new subscribers, and I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of what happened that much, but I will tell you, while I was sick and on my deathbed, for almost an entire year back in, I think it was 2014/2015, I was praying every night. I was praying every night that I wasn't necessarily praying. I was praying for myself, but I was also praying for the people around me, because when you're really sick, something happens. It's kind of really upsetting to see your family. At that time, my dad was still alive. My mom is still around. Most of my friends are still around too, but in a way, you want to get better, but for yourself, but in a way you want to get better for everybody else. And I really prayed a lot. And I'll tell you, this chain that I wear, I think it has the Our Father on it. I bought this at a mall, and I wear this. I swap it out with St. Michael sometimes, but I've been wearing this chain for probably since like 2016, since I got better. I always have something around my neck. I don't really like keep it out and stuff like that, right? I just keep it close to my chest. Only time I take it off is if I've been going to the gym. If I'm doing something, like a squat and I have a bar on my back, I'll take it off just so I don't get injured in some way, manner, or form. But, the fact is, I think that level of stability that, religion and culture and tradition brings to your family is a really big deal. And I think that if you don't have those things, the further, there's an opportunity out there for evil, okay? There's an opportunity out there for your mind to be a little bit manipulated, in my opinion. I think that, you could like Trump, you could hate Trump or whatever. I'm here to say that if we have somebody that wants to put America first, I don't see an issue with that, but I see a lot of people that have an issue with that. And maybe not every footstep is right, but trending in the right direction is a path that I would like to see. And I think it all starts at home. I really do. Your values at home. I don't have perfect kids, and I'm not perfect, right? I've been with my wife for 18 years, and there's ups and downs with everything, but I feel like people are more likely to run away or not contribute in a way and not be present in a way that is kind of contributing to a more hostile environment. And again, 18 years with my wife, of course, everything has not been peachy. She was with me on my deathbed and stood by my side and did what the best that we could do. But a lot of people, when those things happen, they'll run. Okay. I feel like when you have like terrible times, there's more of an opportunity to stray away from that and look for something else. Like the grass is always greener or something like that. And that's not always the case, guys. Okay. It's not always the case. And you're always going to have ups and downs, whether it's a business, your job, of course, your family, your kids, your friends, like there's ups and downs with everything. But the evil of that side of it is pulling away. Okay. It's pulling away and not trying to mend what you already have. Sometimes, yes, if you're in an abusive relationship or whatever is happening, that's a different story. But you need multiple people. It can't just come from one person. You need multiple people to get on the same page. With that being said, the only way to get on the same page is actually talking to each other. And that just reflects back to, I think, what Charlie's message is one thing, but what Charlie was trying to do was to communicate with people effectively and I wouldn't necessarily say to try to change their opinion, but to show what alternate opinions may or may not be, whether they're right or wrong, okay? I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong in terms of, if you want to believe in this or you want to believe in this or whatever it may be, but you got to do something. You got to believe in something. You got to strive for something, right? Otherwise, what are we doing here? Especially if you have kids. And I think that level of dialogue also holds true in the household. The longer that you don't discuss, maybe something that happened with your wife or your husband or your kids and try to figure things out and make things better, you're only going to make things worse. And I feel like that's what's been happening in this country is that there's politics in general. And I mean, even though I do talk about things that are happening, I don't know everything about politics, guys. I don't know every single thing, right? Let's just call it what it is and be fair here. I don't know everything, but when I look at things, I at least know the difference between right and wrong, at least in my opinion, right? What's right and wrong. And I've said this before, and I've said this at a lot of rallies, a lot of people think that they have that monopoly on what's right and wrong. And unfortunately, that divides us even further. It really does. And if you can't talk to the other side, I have a lot of friends that are Democrats. I have a lot of friends that are Republicans. And I would say there's a staunch difference between the two. Some of the Democrats that I'm friends with are more centered. Okay. They're more centered. They live in reality. The same thing with a lot of Republicans. But I will say, with a lot of the crime that's been happening and a lot of the shootings that have been happening, especially due to the fact that I don't know if it's a hormone thing. I don't know what is going on. But this is why I'm so adamant about getting more. And I'm not saying Turning Point is the cure either, but I think it's a step in the right direction. I think a lot of what is happening right now with our kids is coming from schools and having their teachers imprint their beliefs on them. And there's like conflicting opinions here or there. And here's a perfect example of that. This is a real story. So maybe I shouldn't say this, but I am. So like the one day, Trump was on TV, and, my daughter came home from school and she was, watching him talk, and she's like, I hate that guy, I hate this. And we're not like huge. We don't have like, we don't have like Trump stuff all over the house or anything like that, right? We don't have anything political in the house, as a matter of fact. But like, it's scary to think to myself, did my daughter learn that in school? Like, she was only 6 years old at the time. Like, did she learn that in school? Did she learn that from watching something? Where did she learn to dislike somebody that she doesn't know? And I really feel like it could have came from, and I'm not saying a teacher said something. I'm saying there's a probability of that. It could have came from other classmates. It could have came from something. But I will tell you, something is happening in these schools. And I think that the grades are a direct reflection of that. For real, I really do. I remember, again, when I was in Catholic school, I can't remember if it was every Friday or every Monday, but like we would sing the Pledge of Allegiance. We would have a flag hung up in the class. And again, I think it was every single Friday, somebody would get, and I have a really bad memory, but I remember this because I always look forward to this. I remember having to fold the flag in like that triangle and then tuck the bottom of the flag in, and then we would place it somewhere. I don't even know if they do that in schools anymore. Like, I really don't. And just that little tiny thing, I remember that. And at the time, I enjoyed doing it, maybe because it was something of a routine, maybe because it was something of the, getting chosen to do it, but it meant something. It meant something. And I really, really remember that strongly and enjoying having to do that. You guys could comment. I don't know if they still do that in schools. I feel like they don't even have other than like outside on the flagpole. Like, I feel like the American flag is a afterthought. You know what I'm saying? I feel like it's an afterthought. But meanwhile, we have all these other flags in these schools. And, kids are seeing these things, and diversity is fine, but diversity of thought seems to be not fine in these schools. And when these kids try to speak up, or when teachers try to speak up, especially during the Biden administration, man, a lot of people got silenced over their thoughts, and a lot of people were fired because of their thoughts. It just happened. So, and now we're seeing that on the opposite end of the spectrum, because there's a lot of teachers out there that are advocating, for the death of Charlie Kirk and giving like heinous opinions. I covered this, but we need to get back to reality here. Okay. We need to get back to reality. And if people want to have other opinions, I really don't think that we should be inviting certain things in classrooms. I really don't. I think it is very problematic. I don't care what people do, outside of a classroom and outside of like having young kids, but I really don't think that we should be having, like drag queens come in and give story time. Okay. I'll just say it. I just think that's counterproductive to what kids should or shouldn't be doing in school. Outside of school, it is what it is. We can't protect our kids from everything, but we should at least feel safe sending our kids to school and not have to worry. And I will tell you, like, I don't know if I said this the other day on the live stream or not, but this whole entire thing of what happened with Charlie, here's another really good example. So the day, it was either 1 or 2 days after the assassination on Charlie Kirk, my school, they sent out an email. And the email was that there was hate speech written on the school. Now, like, I don't remember where, I think I was that's right. I was on an appointment. I was on a showing appointment in Somerville, I believe. And I remember thinking to myself, I need to leave and I need to go to the school and I need to see what this is about, because obviously they didn't really project or show, or there wasn't much information other than there was hate speech written on, and take it for what it is. I know like the hate speech isn't real. That's just what they said. Okay. I'm just reiterating or trying to say verbatim what was said in the email. And I remember the feeling that I had. I remember this feeling of like, is it somebody that maybe doesn't like me, that is writing something and now knows where my daughter goes to school and writes something on the school. Like, it was a very, very bad feeling. That's why even the same day that I went live, like, I'm thinking to myself, do I continue to do this? Do I continue to speak up and try to at least give my opinions on or in a state where opinions seem very limited because people are out there and they're scared to voice their opinions because they may get fired, they may get blacklisted, they may get ostracized from their family or friends. And that needs to go away. If we can't have conversations with people, what the hell are we doing, guys, right? Like, really, what the hell are we doing? People should be able to believe what they want to believe, but on top of that, people should be able to have dialogue between both sides of the spectrum. And anyway, so when I got there, I probably looked like a lunatic to some of the parents because it was around the time to pick the kids up. So I knocked on the door and I talked to, I believe, the assistant vice principal. I said, "Could you please give me some information on what was written on the school?" And it turned out it was just some kids, middle school kids or whatever, that got chalk. I don't know what they wrote, but just the feeling, like, even though it wasn't a targeted thing or anything of that nature, just after Charlie Kirk's death, just that feeling of like, did I say something somebody didn't like, and are they retaliating against me? Like, that's what was going through my mind, and it's not a good feeling, guys. It's really not. Even to this day, it's still not a good feeling, and I still worry about those things, right? But the reality is, I think that the message and having more people speak up is super important. And I said this at almost all three vigils. I said, I don't know if I said this on the microphone or I said this to people, but the more people need to get into this realm, and they don't have to hop on video and do what I'm doing per se, but more people definitely need to speak up and speak their mind, because if we don't do that, in a state that seems like they want to, or in a region that seems like they want to basically eliminate themselves from the rest of the country, for lack of a better term, right now is the time for teachers, for administrative, for parents, for educators, for everybody to kind of step up, okay? To kind of step up and say, like, enough is enough with this. This is a failed experiment that happened, and we need to get back to reality. And again, I also have said this before, during the Biden administration, it felt like we were living in an alternate reality. Like, it really did. And I know you know what I'm talking about. Like, it felt very, very weird. It felt very, very strange. And we made it through, okay? I don't know what this country would look like if we had another 4 years of that. I really don't know what this country would look like. It wouldn't look good. We'd probably be, look at what's happening in the UK. I've talked about this a little bit, but the UK is in big trouble, okay? They are in massive trouble. They have basically a takeover that's happening in the UK. And I believe this may be happening in Ireland as well. And it's a big mess. And if you really want a, let's say, snapshot of where our country was heading, look no further than the UK. Okay, that's basically that's like a proof of concept of where we were going to go if we had another 4 years of Biden or another 4 years of Kamala Harris. Okay, that's realistically where I think this is heading. Now, last thing, as for the people out there that are, let's say, upset about, Jimmy Kimmel getting fired or whatever, I don't have enough data on this to give my opinion, but I don't think that this was solely due to the fact of, let's say, his comments, okay? I think this may have been a long time coming. The reality is this. So who controls who gets to say what they get to say, and who controls who gets to even be on television like that, is the advertisers and their audience. So like their avatar buyer, okay? And I believe, and I don't have any notes in front of me or anything, but I believe the age group of like 18 to 40 or something like that, or maybe 20 to 45, that's the strongest age group for potential customers. And I think more than likely would happen, again, I would have to confirm on this, but I think there was a couple layers to this. Of course, you have what he said, you have the FCC, either the president of the FCC or the chairman of the FCC that, maybe had have advocated for, Jimmy Kimmel getting fired. But there's also this other dynamic of his audience, his entirety of his audience is fine. But the buyers, okay, the avatar buyers that avatars are looking for, and those data and analytics behind that, I think is a big reason also why he is off the air. So I think if I were to portion this out, I mentioned three things, what he said, the FCC guy, basically kind of, I think, stepping in a little bit there. And also his viewership between that age group, which again are the prospective, let's say, buyers of these products or whatever it is. I would say there's a 33.3% chance of each three of those dynamics happening, and that's essentially why he ended up going off the air. Now, with that being said, a lot of these people, and of course we have freedom of speech here, I think that his ratings also contribute to what he was talking about, because it was no longer just about comedy. It was quite a bit of like propaganda. Okay, let's just call it what it is here, be fair. I think a lot of what Jimmy was talking about, his whole entire monologue, his whole entire set was a, anti-Trump or anti-Republican, right? Like every single little thing that he did. And you have to remember something. When things like that happen, these people have a lot of influence over different audiences. And I think the majority of his audience, per the statistics that I looked at briefly, I think the majority of his audience was outside of that spectrum of, like, let's say 18 to 40 or 20 to 45, whatever it may be. So this was like an older generation. And, they're in a position where I feel like, they're essentially getting brainwashed, right? The media is a big, big problem here. It's a big, big problem in a lot of other countries as well. As you probably know, the UK, they basically, you can't say anything. Like, you'll get arrested. Look at like North Korea too, right? You really can't go out and say anything. So while I'm not like advocating necessarily for him getting fired over what he said, even though I'm disappointed in what he said, right? I grew up watching Jimmy Kimmel. I grew up watching The Man Show. I'm 40 years old, and he is like a completely different person than what he was in the past. Okay. I remember him. Okay. I used to like Jimmy Kimmel a lot, but then it got to be a little bit too much, right? It got to be a little bit too much. So again, I think that's at least that's my reasoning behind it. As more data comes through and comes out, obviously we'll find out more information. But it wasn't just based on, what he said, but even though what he said was basically gaslighting people. And that's a huge problem. And that's also, you could contribute to that, what we have here throughout Massachusetts. We have, obviously the Boston Globe is one of the biggest contributors to very, very left-leaning journalists that are reporting on things or not reporting on things that they deem viable, right? And when we get the news from there, a lot of people read the Globe. They set themselves up in a position where they're not really seeing multiple angles of the same story, and they're getting a very left-leaning story. The Herald is a more conservative paper, and I'm not advocating or saying you should, cancel your Globe subscription and, read the Herald. But what I am saying is that the Herald is a little bit more conservative, and so is the Boston Broadside. Okay. Remember, a lot of these people that read these newspapers, they're part of the older generation. A lot of people don't go on YouTube. They're not watching podcasters. They're not watching videos. And I'm not saying that this is should or will be the source of all information, but what it does is it provides an opportunity to get propaganda directly in front of an older generation, and they really feed off that. They really do, guys. And that's pretty much basically what it boils down to. And I think that's also why we see the mix of this is piggybacking on the younger versus older generation. This is why I also think that we see a lot of younger people getting influenced, and they're having these views, even if it's not direct, they're having these views imprinted on them. Think about what happened in Natick School, where they were talking about, white people, basically like white supremacy or something absolutely insane, and teaching class on it nonetheless. And then you have this older generation that they're being influenced. So the younger generation is getting influenced from the teachers, administrative, the core values of the school. And then the older generation is out there getting influenced by, propaganda. And that's why I think we have this dynamic of these younger people at these protests and then these very older people at these protests. And everybody in the middle is working. They're taking care of their family, or they're taking care of their kids. I could be completely wrong on this. I'm just ranting and voicing my opinion here. But with that being said, I think that there's a huge opportunity for change. And it's not only happening throughout this country. I could see this happening throughout New England. And I really feel like on the other side of this, if we continue that momentum and we keep building on what we have, we're going to enter in a really good position, guys. Because Nate Friedman, he said this best. He said, Massachusetts is great with diversity, just not diversity of ideas. And that's what it boils down to when it comes to the legislature itself. There's not much diversity of ideas, and the Republican Party is very disenfranchised here. And I'm not saying it should be, completely one way or completely the other way. All I'm saying is that there has to be some levels of a balance, or we're just going to get more and more and more of the same. And we have Maura Healey out here. I hope to God, I really hope to God that she doesn't get in. She is the biggest contributor to gaslighting the public here, saying you're lowering this, you're lowering that. But, everyday people don't feel that. Everyday people are not in a position where they feel like things are lower. Everything is costing substantially more. And we're going to talk about that later in this week with other things that they're trying to implement in regards to real estate transfer taxes, which is just absolutely crazy, which is basically just taking more money out of your pocket to live here. So when you have this framework of people that have one set of ideas, the other party is not completely, okay, I'm not trying to badmouth the Republican Party here, but they are a little bit disenfranchised. So let's just call it what it is. You end up with this one party rule. And I've covered this on multiple occasions, and it's not good for anybody to have such a long-standing history of one side. Okay, there has to be other ideas. There has to be more dialogue between the parties, and there has to be, contributing to that dialogue, there has to be some sort of uniformity. Okay, there has to be, or else we're just going to keep on heading down the same hole that we've dug for ourselves. And that's realistically what's happening today. We see a lot of backroom deals. We see a lot of no big contracts. We see a lot more costs as homeowners, whether it be utilities, taxes, whatever it is. We have over 50 towns looking for overrides. This is not how to run a state, guys, okay? This is not how to run a state. The governor should be doing everything in their power to lower costs, but to also talk to the public on how they're going to lower costs, not just gaslight them into thinking that $50 off your utility bill is somehow a massive win. Okay, I think it's absolutely atrocious what they're doing to the people here, especially the older people, which is very surprising too, because you think to yourself, the older people, like the older generation here, is the ones that are getting disenfranchised the most because they are on fixed incomes. If they have an extra $25, $50, $100, $150 a month, that affects them greatly. So it's really surprising to see a lot of the older generation also showing up at these protests. But again, I think that they think that there's a way out of this, and there's not, guys. Okay, I'm here to tell you there's not a way out of this unless you start voting differently. Unless you start bringing in more cultural values and traditions into your home. And like, you got to kind of get out of the weeds a little bit, okay? And you got to listen to people with different opinions. It doesn't have to be me. It doesn't have to be Nate Friedman. It doesn't have to be, it could be anybody, right? More people need to get up and do what I'm doing, whether it's on a microphone, in front of a camera, or just in person, okay? A lot of people are, I've said this before too, a lot of people are worried about, losing their job, losing clients. Of course I've done that. And of course I've lost clients and of course all these other things. But what I gained is a lot more. What I've gained is a lot of people that want to get together for a common cause and want to contribute, support, advocate for what they believe in. And if believing in the American dream, or believing in, culture in America, and believing in tradition and believing in values is a problem, then these people shouldn't be here. Plain and simple. Like move out of the country if you don't like it. That's all that it boils down to. Don't stay here. Like the guy, wiping himself with the American flag at the protest, or the vigil that they were protesting. Like, it's absolutely despicable. Like they hate it that much that they have to do that. It's insane to me. And on top of that, we also had and I'm going to cover this more. We had a shooting happen up in New Hampshire, and I couldn't find the only verifiable information. Remember, I have some tools that maybe the public doesn't have because of the business that I have. I think that maybe this kid was living up there, but I don't know if he was born there. And I'm not saying that you have to be, it's a fact of the matter that, this is perhaps, meaning Massachusetts, where he came from. He may have lived up there. Maybe he was going to school, but it doesn't necessarily matter where he came from. The violence has to stop. I don't know if this was a left-wing guy. I don't know if this was a right-wing guy. I don't know, because again, yesterday, it was more of a blur to me. I was gone all day long. But it needs to stop, guys. Like this political violence and all this stuff. We had that other dad that got shot after he dropped his kid off at school. All of this stuff is not the way. Okay, it's not the way. You can't just go out shooting people because you disagree with them. If you disagree with them, why don't you have some dialogue? I have a lot of friends that I wouldn't even consider them friends, but like we've had people that have stopped over our place when we had a party, whether it was a Halloween party or whatever it may be, that we don't see eye to eye politically, but our kids are friends and we make it work, right? Like we make it work. I don't hate this person because of his views. I just have different views than them. And that's okay. That's okay to have. But now what's happening is in this country, I really feel like the Democratic Party has done irreparable damage to their brand because they are worried about very fringe topics that are only benefiting a very small amount of people here. And the majority of them are not even American people, right? Like they're not even from this freaking country. So, the more and more they double down and triple down and quadruple down on these ideas and this like ideology, the further and further they're pushing people away from how it used to be. I feel like right now the Republican Party wants to position themselves in a way that they want to get back to reality, they want to get back to tradition, and they want to get back to building up America. That's going to take time. And the pathway that we're going, like the path forward that we're going there, whether it be the tariffs or whatever it may be, I don't have modeling software in order to figure out if this is the best path. I'll just be honest with you. But I could say with the utmost confidence that I think that anything that is being done on a federal level is trying to benefit the country. And it's a short-term pain for a longer-term gain. Things don't just change overnight, guys. It just doesn't happen that way. And there's a lot of people that agree with the way things are going. There's some people that don't agree with the way things are going. But I think we all could agree on the way it was heading was it was a dumpster fire, okay? It was absolutely atrocious. And honestly, for a while there, I was becoming a little bit vindictive against Biden and what he was doing. But then after a while, and after Trump got in, I started to think to myself, like, this guy's been in office for so damn long. How could he want to advocate for what he's advocating for? He seems like an American dude, right? Like he looks like one. But I really think, and I could be wrong on this, and I'm not trying to be some conspiracy theorist, but I really think that he was taken advantage of. I do. I could be wrong. You could disagree with me on this, and maybe somebody knows more than I do, but I really think that he got taken advantage of, and I think it's clear that he had something going on cognitively. Like there was something happening there cognitively, and whether it was from people outside of politics that influence politics and they influence these people, like there's always something. So whether it's power or money, whatever it is, like I really feel like he was in a position where he got taken advantage of. And that's a sad story. And if that is truly the case, then like what are we doing, right? Like really, what are we doing here? This is an hour video of me just basically ranting, but I will leave you with one more message. And I've probably said this 15 times. I have no freaking clue, but, we gotta, how could I say this the right way? We have to come together somehow. Okay. We have to come together. We have to make the country better. But more importantly, we need to make the states that are trying to eliminate themselves from the rest of the country better. Okay. And the only way to do that is with the people. And the only way to do that is by having a voice. And the only other way to do that is by voting. And that's basically all it boils down to. We're not going to change Boston red overnight. It's not going to happen. But I feel like there is a mega opportunity. A lot of people, even I've met with many Democrats that do not like Maura Healey. I would be shocked if they vote for her again. But we need to do something, and it will start from there. And it's going to take a lot of work, and people will need patience. If we have one Republican governor, they can't do everything. They're going to get a lot of pushback. Remember, the entire legislature is basically all Democratic, okay? One party rule. So it's going to take time, but we need to be along for that ride of taking time, and we need to support these people along that ride as well. And not only do we have to support them, but we have to support each other. So I'll tell you right now, I said this before too. This is not going to be the last time I speak at events like this. You know, maybe we will plan something, whether it be with Turning Point, without Turning Point, whatever it is. We need to get more people together and to build up on the momentum that we already have. Okay. And I really feel like there are a lot of people out there, a lot of people here in Massachusetts that feel like they're disenfranchised. You know, they can't afford utility bills. They can't afford a house. They can't afford the rent. They're on 8-year waiting lists for frickin', assisted housing. Meanwhile, people that just got here are getting in. We have veterans on the street. We have there's a lot of problems here, guys. A lot of bigger cities and a lot of bigger states, they do have their share of problems. It doesn't matter what side it's on. But if something isn't working for so damn long on one side, I would think that we should provide an opportunity to see if they could change if it goes on the other side. So I'm going to figure out what I could do. I do have a couple contacts at Turning Point. I'm going to reach out to them, and maybe I'll have somebody on my podcast, maybe even this week if I could schedule them in. But yeah, just stay strong out there. Be brave. Okay. It's taken a lot for me to get to the point of doing what I was doing at these vigils. Believe me, if you saw me there, I was probably in the back looking around because of being, a little bit concerned or a little bit worried, but everything was fine. People were standing arm to arm, candles lit, very, very, very powerful. So I hope I didn't waste your time here. I've been talking for an hour. I apologize for that. But I wanted to get all of this off my chest in one video instead of like making a couple 15-minute videos here and there. And maybe I will introduce some of this other stuff in another format and strategize a little bit. I'm getting sick of talking. I'm not sick of talking about what's happening in Massachusetts, but I am getting sick of not seeing some changes. Okay, let me just put it to you that way. I'm not running for politics. I don't have any intentions on running for politics, but I do have intentions on figuring out ways and ideas to potentially make things better. So my videos coming up, I might give my, thoughts on something, and then I may give some support of what I think could work. And again, I don't have a monopoly on what could work or what can't work, but if I could at least put some ideas out there, that may influence other people to piggyback on those ideas to make our state and make New England a little bit more united and a little bit stronger. So that's all I got for today, guys. If you made it this far, congratulations. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.